Hello and welcome everyone to the information session for Collapse and Reconfiguration, modules 1 and 2, Introduction to Alt-Woke Praxis. Before we begin the session, I would like to remind everyone that the event is broadcast live in public. The recording will also be available publicly after the event on the News Center website. And with that, I'm now going to let Jason Adams, one of the organizers and founders of the News Center, take it from here.
Okay. All right, so I want to start out with introducing Alexandra. Alexandra Mason is the instructor for this seminar. She's a member of ANON, which is a techno-futurist left accelerationist collective. There are other members as well, but they many of the other members prefer to remain anonymous. But I'll, so if they want to introduce themselves in their own manner, they can do that. Alexandra herself is, she attended the New School for Social Research for her undergrad. She's currently in the process of completing her master's degree at the Murphy Institute for Worker Education and Labor Studies at CUNY. There she's anticipating completing her thesis on the ever-present role of the technological platforms and data play within society, and possible ways in which future movements can unlock their emancipatory potential. Right now, she's working on several essays with other members of ANON, in addition to the ones that have already been put out there, such as the Alt-Woke Manifesto, the Alt-Woke Companion, and a number of other things. She's working on several essays with the other members of ANON, independent work for future talks, pairing pop culture analysis with theory, and exploring other topics of interest to her, such as biopolitics, the relationship between history and temporality, power, and surveillance. And with that, I'll turn it over to Alexandra.
Okay, hi everybody. I'm glad to see everybody here. Sorry about, there's like a bit of a noise in the background because people are having a party right now or something. Yeah, across the street. But I did want to start out by asking if people have read the manifesto and the companion, or one or the other, because I figured that's how I would center this info session, is sort of like exploring the themes that we've talked about in that, in those pieces, and expounding upon them, and also talking about like our view of accelerationism, sort of why we chose the paths that we did, and then talking a little bit on, or touching a little bit on some of the stuff that we are working on currently but haven't released and will unfold in this class. So yeah. Has anyone looked at that stuff or read anything, or are we starting from just like base level? Because either way, that's fine. Oh, cool.
Yeah, I've read both, so.
Okay, sick. Okay, so pretty much oh yeah, sure, we can share the link. If anybody actually can grab the link for that, that'd be easier.
I'll grab the link right now.
Oh, yep.
Yeah. Oh, thank you, that was really quick. Well, we basically wanted to go through that first and then also talk about the structure of the class. And the reason why we wrote the manifesto was, I think, facilitated by Trump's win. We are, I don't know where everybody else is located, but we are in New York. And that was just sort of a pivotal moment for us. Nobody really knew for sure that he was going to win. And before that, though, like years before that, there seemed to be these things that we had just noticed going sort of awry or amiss, or things that seemed sort of like minor annoyances at the time, but like after the election, everything seemed to come into focus into one like very clear picture. And so wrote it and started off with maybe, I don't know, maybe some people took it as a little scathing, but we started off as like this negation and a rejection of woke politics, which we go on to define later on, mainly because we thought that there were some things that the left or the political left could have done or maybe improved on, and we wanted to expound upon those points.
I guess like I was the main author of that manifesto. My name's Kareem. Some people might know me already. And I guess at the time, it's funny, like the manifesto. It was a while since I had touched like any like theory literature. I think I left school in 2014, and yeah, I just didn't left all that stuff behind really. And an anecdote. I guess I was at work one day and I brought in like the third volume, just to read something on the train, and I brought in the third volume of Capital, but I left it in the break room, and that caused like all this disruption at my job. So as a punishment, I was like given overnight shifts with one other employee who was going to be groomed for a leadership role, and we were the only ones like at the location. So like we would just spend the night like talking really. And he asked asked about that book that I brought in. And through those talks, like I brought to it was it was by introducing him to this stuff, it was like, my like reintegration with this material. And from there, like just noticing things on the news, noticing conversations that the two of us have had like before, and with other members of the collective have had before, noticing tendencies, noticing this ascendant right-wing movement developing, and the conditions of why this right-wing movement developed. And I guess like my past is like as a former journalist, and like I wanted to present present what the alt-right was many years ago. And even having some correspondence with people, because wanting to write the story, having correspondence with people within the alt-right. So it's to see the media, I guess, to see like both pre and post election, to see the media describe it. It was like a very, their definition is very small and limited, and not completely accurate, and doesn't completely encompass what that growing movement is. And just I guess like from there, it's like I guess after the election, me and this coworker actually started penning things down together. And he contributed to like the first, what he would contribute, I would expound on. And I guess I started a little group, a Facebook group with like several of the people that we went to school with. And that was like the base of the first like 6 members of the collective. We didn't really think of it as a collective at the time. We were just, we're all coming from, I guess, the same like discipline. We come from different disciplines, but we had the same perspective about these things. And throughout, I guess, from 2012 to about now, we've always been in correspondence with these topics. And I guess yeah. So I guess like these conversations, like like I guess the first like iteration of like the manifesto, the first draft was like unedited and just like raw, and that's because a lot of that text really was just copy and paste of either conversations that we've had, or things that I jot down on my phone, or things that this coworker and I would like write together and like develop into something, and that that ended up being what the basis of like what this thing is. And I guess at the time too, there was this Berlin artist Daniel Keller, and we thought that that we were on the same trajectory in a sense, and like he's the one who like threw out the word alt woke, and I was like he pretty much gave the word to us like after a while, because it was just like a Twitter joke to him, but it ended up I guess like woke politics, like really that idea. I was seeing that a lot, I guess, like online, seeing that a lot, people using that in a semi-ironic way, woke that word. So like I think that solidified, that crystallizes or just defines like this type of left politics that's kind of amenable to trying to make itself amenable to liberalism, that we did not like, I guess, that we felt an antagonism toward. And you want to continue?
Yeah, I mean, so basically it is that, and I did jot down some stuff going through what has been written thus far. Mm-hmm. And one of the questions that we might, or has been posed before to us, is the one of directionality, because it's obviously split up in terms of political sectors, like moderate left, far left, then things like that, which could be critiqued in terms of, because globally those take on different shapes economically. There are different principles that the left over in France or whatever would adopt, or and such. But we did, I think it was, as Kareem was saying, a more reactive piece. And so we were like sort of reacting to the immediate things happening around us. So at the time, I guess it was structured in terms of this local sense of these directionalities. Although I don't think that it makes it unmoldable to global things that are happening, because like something with like Le Pen or whatever is sort of being the same networks that are happening online and things like that are affecting, I guess, global space, or at least presenting the same problems or similar problems on different tiers to the whole world. So that was another thing. So I did want to move on to talk about like what we thought woke was. And there's a quote from the manifesto itself that I would want to read. So woke is a misnomer. It's actually asleep and myopic, a safe space for the easily distracted and defensive pop culture inbred. We also say that woke is safety pin politics, masturbatory symbolism, and virtue signaling of a deflated left insulated by algorithms, filter bubbles, and browser extensions that replace pictures of Donald Trump with Pinterest recipes. So I guess in just those quotes was highlighting a whole bunch of things that we saw that we wanted to, I don't know, maybe alert or to people of and write about and things like that. So basically it was that we do like pop culture. We analyze it a lot and we watch a lot of it. But I think over time on the internet, we had started seeing a lot of people using celebrities as representative mouthpieces and kind of holding them very accountable for the types of politics that I think that they themselves should have maybe been engaging with. And also believing that this idea of representation itself was a win for progress. Whereas I don't discount representation at all. I think that like if you change sort of these material situations or the underlying current of things, like you will inevitably get different types of representation. So whereas people would, we said believing Jaden Smith becoming the face of Louis Vuitton is enough to qualify as a win for progress. So I think it kind of helped create this situation that we're in now where we don't have a lot of representational political power, but on TV, there's a lot more representation, a lot more shows. And that dichotomy is one that's like, you know, has to be corrected or overcome in order to have the type of, I don't know, I want to say like buying power or actual leveraging power that would be necessary to facilitate some sort of change. Also, so yeah, it was written from a place of like sort of fear and forewarning. And the quote in there is like ascendant fascism, which we said like, I guess pretty early on, it seemed like there were lots of things that were kind of clicking into place with this election win. I mean, Trump himself is like obviously a bit of a fool and whatever, but there's a lot that we're going to go into later, probably Kareem, about who is behind and like who's connected to him and like what that means, and like go on to talk about accelerationism, right and left, and all of these things are sort of like coalesce together to create a framework that right now looks very like bleak. So one thing that I did want to talk about, and I wrote down some notes on, is how I guess the media had presented Trump, or how they were touched upon him before the win, like, and before later in the election, I think it shifted, but towards the beginning. So I think it was highlighting one of the things that we were also trying to talk about in the piece. There's in the section that's called talking about like moderate liberals or moderate left or something, which would be, I guess, your liberal uncle or something like that, like center left and be like towards whatever you discern to be the radical line. And like, again, we can open stuff up later and talk about these distinctions, you know, because I I think they're more representative than anything, and we can talk about like sort of maybe some networks or whatever that flow in between them. But anyway, so during the election or before the actual election, I think Trump wasn't really being cast as the anomaly as he was really, and instead like people were focusing a lot on casting him as a bit of like a buffoon and like stupid, which like yeah. But instead, like more realistic things like his really shady business deals and things like that, or even the assault scandals were actually really quickly in my mind like swept under the rug or not presented as much because they wanted to characterize him as a stupid person who could never win. And with that said, I think that was highlighting a bit of one of the insults or smears that I think moderate left and beyond, like the whole left, gets thrown at them is one of being too like cocky and too snooty for their own good, because it was kind of like on the one hand painting him as this stupid idiot, and then on the other actually having platforms in which you are very seriously spending time on whether or not the phrase grab her by her pussy is locker room speak. And so that, like, if you want to talk about the purpose of journalism, like loosely with this definition, it being a way of disseminating information to the public, I think we're caught in a world where these things are sort of breaking down because you have like television punditry where people have very ridiculous topics, or in this case, more ridiculous than usual topics. And they want to uphold this format that is already absurd, and that you have, you know, we all see that, I guess, or some people see these formats with these punditry shows where it's like the topic is, yeah, grab her by the pussy, good or no, or something. And one person is like, that's abhorrent. And the other person is ardently supportive of it and being like, well, you know, men talk like that all the time. And in that way, I think it's been shown that people don't actually receive information very well when you have that format, because it just seems like it makes people internalize things and see it as if there's just two sides to every story, and gets lost in the form of information. So I guess I'm saying like the form itself in which like things were being packaged were already absurd, and this Trump election process was highlighting and sort of deconstructing this already like absurdist type of platform that people felt beholden to keeping up just because that's how we had done it in the past. So yeah,
It's also like I guess a perversion of journalistic objectivity. You know, where it's, I guess, you know, the traditionally the way the journalist is to present, you know, you would present like the opposing argument, but you're supposed to remain objective, but you have, you know, you have an angle, and you have a thesis that you want to present, and you let the individual speak with the intention of having people come to the conclusion that you did in your angle, which is by letting their words, letting their quotes like speak for themselves. And I guess like it's with Trump, with the media presentation up to the win, and you could make that, extend that to from, you know, as early as like the 90s with like how they presented the Gulf War. You know, you can go up to that point really, but like I guess it follows this like timeline where I guess like the media, especially like a 24-hour like cable news cycle, has become like this I guess vector for narrative, narrative, and I guess we call it hegemony making, continuing this framework that they want to have. And it's like, you know, I think different studies done where like the colors are picked a certain way, and I guess also on the upper end, like on the board end, you also have like a lot of people in advertising moving into like mainstream press, and that the puffery in advertising, it's like it's now permeating what should be an objective media. So it's like, perverse form of like journalistic objectivity and perversion of, I guess like it's something that's that is already perverse, like branded content and making it, even more perverse. Like it.
Yeah, because even I guess in a sense, like both sides of like the moderate left and right sort of do this and have latched on for a long time onto sensationalism in order to like give people what they want in terms of stories. I mean, obviously things happen in real space, so they are actual stories, but it's about this digging beneath that and sort of giving that. Like, I guess an example is that if you ever watch Tucker Carlson, he clearly exploits this TV punditry narrative or way of showing things in order to always make himself look good and make it look like this other person doesn't know what they're talking about at all. He interrupts them. He always has this stupid smirk on his face.
He gaslights them.
Yeah, he gaslights them, except when they're on his political, they lean towards his political whatever. Then he's like a little bit more amenable to them. But the whole show is to really have on the other side and to like gaslight them and make them feel a certain way. So to the viewers, and this is exposed even more with the with the internet, where people will, before even looking at a video, in the captions or whatever on YouTube, say like, Tucker Carlson owns whatever. So you already know what you're supposed to take away from this piece of media before you engage with it. And when I say with also the moderate left doing it, I think recently they had Sean Spicer on for the Emmys or something, given all the things that like have happened and how this administration is like very clearly obstructing truth and things like that. It's gets turned into more of a spectacle, like, oh, we'll have him on and make a few jokes at the Emmys, like, and that's absurd. Oh wait, Alice, you should maybe talk about that article if you want to bring that in. Yeah, or link it.
I'll link it. I didn't actually read it properly. I just saw the headline and was sent it and just laughed and made Hillary Clinton playing 5D chess jokes.
Amazing. Well, yeah, thanks. So not to get too wrapped into that stuff, we did also talk about later on in it, just so this is zooming out a little bit and making it more of a slightly global perspective, where right and left got sort of melded together into neoliberalism, and that this was sort of, these policies and this way of dealing globally was driven, both parties sort of drove the same car in this manner. And to quote, this is why the radical left blames liberals as well as conservatives for command and control policing, mass surveillance, and this century's rationale for endless warfare. So I feel like it's somewhat explanatory, but while like both parties to us, I guess domestically, there are some difference in terms of policies, like globally, they, a lot of them sort of do coincide together and have historically moved together to act as as two sides of the same coin, arming different groups and moving together towards the depersonalized warfare of the future. And that's just talking about like how, drones and all these other things, the military industrial complex has definitely like technologically advanced a lot. Sure. So
any questions or wants to chime in?
Maybe we'll like pause that for a second before we move on, if there's anybody who wants to interject or talk about things.
No.
Questions? Nope. Anyone? Hey, you can go first. Yeah, sure.
Is that PR political groups increasing speed in a sense?
Alice, do you want to expand on that?
Oh, well, like, you're talking about sort of, was it the neolibs? Sorry, I'm like going between different tabs at the moment.
No, it's totally cool.
Yeah, but you were saying about like these groups being two sides of the same coin, and then went on to talk about like the industrial complex and drones and stuff like that. So would what you'd be getting at is sort of like these pole groups, like, as you were saying, supporting and I would say giving resources to different, like, I don't know, paramilitary groups or whatever, and then sort of increasing the military complex in those sort of areas. It depends, sort of like creating an increase of speed, as in like increase in military technology as the process and like pushing forward of sort of just like increasing of military might and shit like that.
I would say speed in the Virillo sense would apply more so to like news media in particular, like to a 24-hour news cycle. It's
Okay.
I guess like although yeah, I guess it does have some applicability. It certainly has applicability to the military industrial complex. I guess with like how it applies to news media is like it's, you know, a 24-hour news cable program is really just there to, you know, Fox News is really just there to extend Rupert Murdoch's, like, you know, checking account at the end of the day, and speed in the sense that it has to, you know, because I guess there were people that, you know, there were people at Fox News who were opposed, like I think Sam Shepard recently, you know, this year, you know, was opposed to everything that Trump stood for.
Even Murdoch was.
Yeah,
and
Rupert Murdoch himself was, but you know, he chose to, you know, toe the party line because, well, for I guess two reasons. One, the GOP is weak in a sense, as weak as like the Democratic Party to a degree, and to you know, they're, again, what's the saying, like, you know, parties are weak but ideology strong, like where you know, they have to, I guess, like to, you know, to renew his interest, to renew like that, to justify that advertising space that his, you know, that Fox News, like that Fox News is there for it. He has to, you know, to align to what the audience has to say. So like there's, yeah, I guess, yeah, this conflation of puffery, you know, like within advertising, like where I guess like where they, I guess these people know, some people, they've been doing it for so long, like Hannity, Geraldo Rivera, they've, you know, they've always, you know, I guess they've always known that they were tabloid news, but where other, I guess, more ideological, and I guess some people within GOP were Fox News, who were traditional Republicans, were like opposed to Trump, was, I guess, the vulgarity of it too, which was something new. But like they have to, again, toe this line both for monetary reasons and, you know, for the sake of the party.
Right.
You know, so it's like, I guess, this blurring of where they know what they're saying isn't quite right, but if you're a viewer seeing this, it just reifies your position, and it guarantees, you know, a continuous, not only a viewership, so that Rupert Murdoch can make his like advertising money at the end of the day, but also like a base in the sense that the Republican Party, you know, they can themselves gaslight, you know, they can themselves gaslight their base into voting for this man, like, you know, with these extreme alarmist stories and I guess like curated truths that they, you know, Fox News is always trafficked in.
Right, and it gets, I mean, I think like the whole linking it to other places in the world where it trickles down, it's not just like what I just said with like the way in which neoliberalism has did really take over or like influence the entire global system, and like, well, American politics, and then that affected how these policymakers interacted with other countries abroad, but also that like by linking those nations that are able to use the internet, and I think it's increasingly more and more, there are many different things that are happening there where like it is it's showing that it is in some sense like conferring people's biases by the way that they use it, and even in, I guess, other nations where there isn't widespread access or whatever to the internet, I think Facebook was making an initiative to bring it to these other countries, but they were being caught, and I think in India they actually banned them completely because they're being caught like violating net neutrality, or thought to do so, because they were banning competitors and things like that. And in some countries, some people were thinking that the internet was Facebook. So yeah, I mean, I think the role of technology is sort of like linking these things together more and more. We did want to skip a little bit to, yeah, I'll talk about the actual structure of the seminar, and maybe that'll link things together. If anybody has any questions, surely just like interject and come off the mic, I won't mind. But basically what we wanted to talk about, or not just to be pessimistic and talk about like where we think people have like faltered and what the left can do, but also talk about like ways of creating new forms of being. Like I think we pretty much, what alt woke is just a new, completely like new framework in all sense of the word. So for one, we do want to focus on like accelerationism and the accelerated process. We think that it's really important to us, and that's why like we got into this network in the first place, because we think that it's the process that is best apt to help through this, navigate through this storm. And also like in the companion, I'm pretty sure it says something like how Trump to us sort of like kicks off the accelerated process. So it already is sort of happening in real time, but it's just leaning right. And so, oh, sure. I was curious about the communication sector. Do you mind saying that question like out loud? I'm sorry.
Yes.
Yeah, the moment might have passed, but this was sparked by sort of thinking about speeding up communications, consolidating identities. And what's happened in India is very interestingly, WhatsApp is the core mechanism. Everybody's got cell phones, and data plans are fairly cheap. And in fact, WhatsApp has become way more important than any of the other spaces, Twitter, Facebook, any of those, because there are these closed groups and people keep adding, dropping each other, you know. So there's a way in which I'm just wondering whether the same techniques that say work for intervening in Reddit groups also works in WhatsApp or something, or do you all, or is part of the analytics here that each of these different spaces have a different time frame, a different subjective modality? I mean, I'm just trying to figure out how you're theorizing this area in terms of how you partition it. That's all.
Sure. I think I'll go on to like how the class is structured by also like, because that will like be enveloped within that, like ways of resistance online, and like keeping in mind like different platforms, because I think different platforms do have different languages or ways of communicating within them. But I think that there are like some principles that we have or ideas that we have that could like work across a lot of different spaces. So yeah, I'll just go into that. Yeah, so as I was saying, like we were thinking a lot about the accelerated process, and that's saying that like sort of here, at least for Trump's winter, some of these things happen, like a Le Pen like running and things like that are showing that there is a budding accelerated process that we believe to be shifting right. Along with also like, you know, neo-reaction, if anybody knows that, or I'm assuming like definitely most people do here. But they have a lot of power, and they're being, in Silicon Valley at least, they're definitely like being influenced and things like that. So we see the accelerated process as sort of akin to like line of sight or things like that, like vision. And we're also taking into consideration temporality and events. So if the window is sort of shifted this way, there are different ways in which we can approach this if you want to move resistance the other way. So one could be, in certain instances, decelerating. And there's ways in which you can do that. And then another thing that we can do is like anticipate or try to accelerate even faster to make a broader shift over to the other way. Because the accelerative process, we believe, like as it goes faster and faster, opens up the possibility for more black swan or unseen events that wouldn't normally happen, and that can shift things more violently or whatever. But you want to be careful of it, and so we're like thinking of this accelerative process. what that means, and like bringing it down a little bit more, is that in terms of this class, we're having on multiple guests, and each guest and each class is centered around a different node that we see that can be connected to create a framework. So we see the accelerated process as like affecting, I guess, a whole circuit or network of different interdisciplinary nodes. So that is economic and social and technological. And when you're pulling on one thing or affecting one thing in one node, it invariably like sort of flows into others. Historically, maybe we can talk about, although it's tricky, like this relationship between science, for instance, and technology. And that's maybe an example. And in that way, every class is supposed to be, like functioning or talking about one of these different nodes. So we're talking about Afro-pessimism and Afrofuturism. And that, I think, as you said, would be like the who is accelerating. And we also talk about time. And I think the first class we're supposed to do two things. We just talk about Benjamin and Messianic time, and also Baudrillard and simulation, and a few other things in there. But it's also like setting up the framework of the world, talking about this idea of simulation and being removed from it through technology, and moved from the real. And also these ideas, like alternative ideas of history. So obviously Benjamin made a bit of a critique of historical materialism, but this is positing a possible way of looking at alternative forms of history to stitch together narratives that can help the, I guess, line of sight, help people see where the line of sight is and where these moments of revolutionary action can occur. Another thing that we had, and we have that, Afro-pessimism, Afrofuturism. Later on, we do want to talk about, devote a whole class to economics and talk about how capital can be distributed, the circuit of capital, Marx as accelerationist, things like that. We also have one on actual, like, on the ground, I don't really like that term, but like what one call like horizontal politics, and talking about like how maybe the left can, instead of, well, one, they can maybe like absorb themselves into pre-existing institutions if they find them problematic, with the intent of deconstructing those institutions. And another is building a bit of an undercommons and creating alternative institutions to these things. And online, I guess, in different ways to resist is, I guess, understanding the different environments and language of different sites. Although I think like images and memes like do have some permeance on some sites. For instance, what you would do then is like, or even, I guess, carrying on into the idea of like making the undercommons, what we say in some things is to think like a corporation in a sense, which sounds more controversial than I guess we actually meant it. But in one way, for instance, is thinking about like how corporations can have global influence and permeance for many different reasons. But I guess one is that they hijack this natural process that we have as humans to like make meanings out of symbols. And so if one were to make like a lefty or whatever resistance to that, and to brand that in a sense, the use of consolidated and like easily to recognize symbols could be one way of that. So like every time you see globally, regardless of like language or whatever, you see the symbol of McDonald's, you know that it's McDonald's. And that is hijacking our like processes. And that is sort of what capital does, is like take over and absorb every real space and now every digital space. Yeah, maybe some questions. If not, I'll just rant a little bit more about the class, although I think that was sort of it. Well, yeah, I mean, isn't that sort of, so I guess I'm expanding upon that to talk about advertisement. When you talk about like visual advertisement, I was reading this essay, because I was reading Mark Fisher's Capitalist Realism, and I was reading the essay that somebody else had written with the term, I think before that, about advertising using the term capitalist realism. And in it, he's talking about how like in visual advertisement, it is using like this idea of signs and signifiers to create ads that have no particular space and time. In a sense, weird, but like in certain car commercials or something, you're not in a particular place a lot of the time. It's like a juxtaposition of multiple different symbols that are meant to create a certain feeling within you. And the problem, because it's done through capitalism, and the logic of capitalism is just to create more profit, more capital, regardless of other things. So the problem with advertisement sometimes is that or oftentimes, is that by creating these signifiers, it just relies on the signs and symbols that are already there. And so that could be, sometimes those are very like hegemonic signs and symbols. So it's, you don't just want to have a car, you want to have like the dim lights because you're selling to men, because men buy cars, and you have a woman who's half naked because these are all the signifiers that you think will make this person get this thing. Or you sell dolls and Barbies to small girls because it both helps you sell your product and plays on a pre-existing notion of what these concepts are and how we recognize each other. Some of them, like I said, like hegemonic, and also reifies them in that process. So you buy more Barbies, and now you have girls that still want them, and equate that with this idea of like femininity and things like that. So with that in mind, I think that there's ways in which, like, given the way that the internet, on certain sites at least, like, is conversing quickly at a rapid pace through images, or even if we want to take it outside of the internet and talk about how I was talking about making like literal undercommons and like different forms of institutions, we could think about that in terms of like branding and like that, but like more actual revolutionary ways of making these signs.
Okay.
Yeah, because like,
okay, so like sort of, yeah, I'll just say co-opting, sort of like co-opting methods and practices that capitalist like brands and sort of states use, but in a sort of Gramscian counter-hegemonic fashion.
Yeah, exactly. That was the thought. One of the thoughts. That was exactly it. Sorry, I said like better in like one sentence. But surely, like, because usually when, and Mark Fisher actually does talk about this in Capitalist Realism, when you do tend to have forms of resistance that already exist or pop up or crop up in pop culture and other like spheres of media, oftentimes what capitalism will do is just like eat it alive and absorb it into its circuit. So then you start getting, I guess, commercials that are like, people are kind of like looking grungy, but it's just to sell flannels. But I think like now is the time, is the window more than ever that people are getting sort of hip to this or noticing it, like they're like people's reactions to that awful like Pepsi commercial or something, where it is very obvious that somebody's trying to co-opt and absorb your form of resistance. And so I think that means that the window is open for real forms of resistance.
Okay. So like sort of how, I don't know, late in Brecht's life, he was talking about how his theatre was going to be absorbed and created into like sort of the methods that he used in his early theatre were going to be absorbed and become an aestheticized version of his revolutionary theatre. And like you can see that in films where there's like constant breaking of the fourth wall and use of like text in like theatrical productions and signs like that just pop up, etc. So is it sort of like that? Oh yeah.
Yeah, I think similar to that.
More or less,
yeah, more or less.
Okay.
So I was gonna move to a little bit. I didn't want to harp too much on
good.
But and like I said, in other ways that I think could work, I mean, across the board, depending on where and whatever, is this idea of people like should maybe probably just like infiltrate these spaces if they can, and go undercover in certain places if possible. Or I mean, you don't always have to physically go I think you can circumvent it through like use of that technology, just assuming, because that's what sort of, it's not what trolling is, but trolling is this idea of like trying on different identities and stuff like that. So you can always sort of do that if you stick around long enough, I think. Also, what I'm thinking about in terms of what other classes we have to talk about, like what else we're doing.
One on, I guess, the alt-right and
oh yeah, we're in.
Yeah, I think that's like
and neo-reactionary theory and yeah, stuff like that, and actually like having one class sort of devoted to this whole like far right-wing technocratic capitalist epoch that is on the horizon and should probably be learned about and circumvented if possible.
And I guess like in terms of assignment, for each class, whatever the subject is, I guess the task, should you guys choose to do it, would be to create like an alt-woke style like document of your own.
Yeah, I think so. What we wanted to do, we were rolling around with Mo, or I think it might have been Mo's idea actually, is that by the end of the class, that you guys produce your own manifestos, and that can be like taken in any which way that you want. It could be like a literal just list of images, that could be anything, in order to, I guess, practice or think about the ways in which we're trying to think about these things, which is taking your like ideas and trying to think about like, I guess, ideas of praxis and things like that. Who else do we have on? Oh, right. So we're also doing a class devoted to gender, and we're having Petra on from xenofeminism, from the Laboria Carbonics, sorry, and talking about gender, because in these ways we're trying to posit both like these ideas of possible liberatory subjects. I know there's like a plethora of them that can exist and do exist globally, but we're talking about ways of deconstructing these notions. At least, I guess it is deconstructing here for this Western idea, because other places globally have already different ideas, or more than just the binary. But we're exploring in that class. Oh, bye. Thank you so much for coming. Talking about this idea of gender, or particularly like transness, being akin to like hacking, or like hacking the processes. And in that, we're going to also touch upon this like overarching idea that is like, I was going to say like devolving, or like deconstructing this sort of like nature person divide or human divide, and sort of also devolving this like anthropocentric fixture that we've all sort of been moving around for a while. Because like, I guess in the conversation with Petra, I was talking about with her, was that you can also think of gender or whatever, doing these processes as hacking, but like people don't talk about that in terms of people taking insulin or other things that like already are, that you could, that people already accept or do, that could be akin to already like changing your processes, or preventing something, or whatever you'd like to call it. So yeah.
Let's just open up to questions.
Yeah, questions or anything.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yeah, sure.
Cool, awesome. I hope I didn't cut anybody off. There's a bit of a delay, of course. So I have to admit, this is my first like season with the News Center. I have an art degree. I work in advertising. I don't have any formal training like whatsoever. I do read and listen a lot, so I'm totally following this conversation. But all to say that like my connection to, I loved the Alt-Woke Manifesto, and I loved just like the diagrams on the advertising industry and the mediatic rhetoric employed by advertising. So my question is that like, I would be really interested in using this session to develop a personal manifesto on like my relationship to advertising, or just where I think advertising is globally at this moment. But I would probably, I could definitely use some like like a personal mentorship session with
certainly
anyone involved. I'm just wondering if how that might go about.
Well, definitely. I mean, if you're going to be in the actual class, I feel like it'll... Oh, is there an echo? Hold on. Hello? Okay. If you're going to be... Are we good?
Yep.
If you're going to be in the class, I think different inspiration for your framework will be revealed as we go along. It's like maybe we're talking in like abstracts and stuff, but when we have like the assigned readings, we're not, also not everything that we assign will be like reading. We're also thinking about putting like some visual stuff and some actual like anime and things like that, and like to also talk about these things. So there'll be like many different ways in which like you can interact with this. And like I said, like also this stuff wouldn't be, that's the idea for what people would be creating by the end of the whole course. So you'd be able to like, yeah, anime, pull stuff in from other things. And I am also like in Cream as well, like we're always available to talk to people and do like side stuff and whatever.
I'll put the email, there are 2 emails.
Yeah.
Where you can reach us at, and you know. But yeah, a private mentorship, I mean.
Oh.
Yeah.
I should probably mention that the new center has a new feature. It's called like consultations and tutoring, where you can actually book like a solid session with one of our instructors outside of class, whatever.
Oh, word. I didn't even.
Oh. This is good for you guys to know too. Yeah. Do you have anything else in regards to talking about, like, there's going to be 2 modules, right?
Right.
4 sessions and then the other 4 sessions about, I guess, maybe talk about like the readings or certain themes.
Yeah,
You want to do that?
I guess with the first module, collapse, I guess what we want to establish is this idea of like the world and like the earth being 2 separate concepts. Like I guess the map thing, the map territory relation, where it's like the earth is like, you know, this terrestrial like locality, and like the world is like our, you know, like aesthetic framing of that territory, and that the idea of the world has like, yeah, the idea that either the world has already ended or is in like the process of ending, and that you know, like I guess what Benjamin calls like the storm of progress. That's what we consider the accelerated process, and that's like ending that this idea. I guess in a conceptual or epistemic way, it's like through, I guess, this meltdown of like, you know, media, like we're seeing now, like traditional media can no longer, the internet wraps around like traditional media. Traditional media can no longer adequately comment on the world. You know, the art world can't really comment, you know, can make no meaningful statement about the world that someone on the internet with like, you know, Photoshop, you know, someone on Photoshop could make a better statement or grander statement or reach more people than anyone, any artist really. Or that, yeah, just like that these institutions are like, you know, falling, like, you know, capitalist firms, finance, all these things, they kind of can't keep up with or control capital any longer. That there is like space, being open up for like, I guess, like a post politics. Or, you know, I guess we're going to be calling it the under politics.
And that'll be like the Reconstruction, the next.
Yeah, and that moves into Reconstruction. So I guess like the first module we'll be discussing, you know, different way, how like this idea of the world is ending, like the different ways in which it's ending. With, I guess, like the alt-right being, you know, if you, I guess like redefining like what left and right is, like I guess if modernity is a symptom of capital or vice versa, the right is just this reaction to it. reaction to modernity, or so, you know, in a sense, reaction to capital. Even though, like, specifically with, I guess, like, you know, with the American GOP, they're so pro-corporate, pro-capital, but it's like they aid and abet this thing that is it's ultimately against them anyway. And I guess defining capitalism as, I guess defining, capital and capitalism, capitalism is like or the economy as an ecosystem. Like, I guess that's like the one thing, if there's one takeaway from the Austrian school, is that their concept of like catalaxy is like, it's an accurate concept of like, you know, the economy is like this little biome of different interrelations, and like how all these like different interrelations, like they, you know, contribute to this like larger, more intangible like system. And like this, you know, post coming out of feudalism into mercantilism, capital, it's this, you know, that would be the, like, you know, intangible system of the day, capital. And that the left, you know, I guess like the left would be, I guess we're also taking a bit from like, you know, reaction in some sense to this idea of the cathedral. Like the left is the you know, Protestantism led to the development of like Enlightenment values and modernity, and capitalism. I guess like how we conceive the left, it would be like I guess like a negative orientation, or I guess like an orientation of negation, where it's like it's more Gnostic than Protestant. And well, you know, we'll be exploring that later on in other classes too. Like I guess like to expound why that fits. Gnosticism is, you know, for what people know, will get into it, like, it's, you know, not to write but or talk about, but like Gnosticism is very anti-world. It's anti this world. So it's like, it's on a conception, you know, on that aesthetic level or a conceptual level, like it fits to us. So it's I guess that we'll cover in, you know, the collapse module. And then reconstruction would be alternatives. So.
Yeah, so basically this idea of the world is like more of a conceptual one, but also maybe literal, depending on how you want to take it. And we're talking about like how how certain modes of being are probably possibly ending, definitely. And the next module is talking about like what we can replace it in, and with ideas for that in various ways. So I guess themes that we're going to bring up are history and temporality, ideas of like networks, systems, ecologies, I guess, thinking of these things that we have as systems, and what's other stuff? Yeah, so in terms of some of the readings, we have, I think for the first class, it's supposed to be some episodes of Serial Experiments Lane, which is this anime where this girl gets hooked into this, like, and it's weird because it was pre-social media, this pre-social media conception of the internet called The Wired. And yeah. And I think because it brings up a lot of things that we're going to be talking about, because the first class is more about like time and history. And so then we also have Thesis on the Concept of History by Benjamin, where we'll explore Messianic time. Future Shock, why Alvin Toffler was wrong, a more like positive-ish idea of technology. And then simulacra and simulation. So throughout this all, we're also talking about like visual media and visual ways of talking to each other. And just like as we go forward with technology, one of the possible after effects being a movement away from the real. And so maybe we should make a conception that like already is sort of away from that, but like helps natural things, if that makes sense. So. Yeah. I know we're also going to do like for the readings are more so dictated by the guest who's coming on for that session. I know there's one that we're doing either second or third that's more about like Afrofuturism, some Afro-pessimism. And we're doing some, I think like Sun Ra poems for that, and jazz, and we're thinking about like how like possibilities of the revolutionary subject can be used there. And for the gender class, I think we're doing Tetsuo Junkie and some things from Sadie Plant on the Matrix. May or may not do Donna Haraway. I feel like lots of people do that, so we may or may not, but this idea of like biohacking gender as flexible, stuff like that. For the econ class, we might just do some Marx. We haven't really fully decided for that one, but maybe some Cernic, we'll read some Cernic stuff, things like that, different ideas that can, so in every module, I guess, there are 2 separate modules, one is collapse and one is reconstruction, and every single class is supposed to be guiding you in terms of a different node and way of thinking about this network that we're creating. So it would be different ways of thinking about these identities, different ways of thinking about these economic processes, different ways of thinking about all of this. So there you go.
Thanks. Sounds really great. Sounds very comprehensive too. Anyone else have any questions? So I guess we'll be starting next week. And if anyone's interested in registering, just shoot us a message. Any final words?
Oh, I have a question actually.
Sure.
Does that mean then that the class, because originally it would have ended on that everything slid over a session pretty much?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay, that's fine. That's one thing.
Okay.
Okay.
Great. Yeah. Thanks. I'm gonna stop.